Hello, everybody, and welcome to Ice-Burgh To Go, your daily dose of Pittsburgh Penguins news and analysis. You can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcasts from. Not a great weekend for the Penguins, especially the way it ended in Denver, Colorado, blowing a 4-0 lead to fall to the Colorado Avalanche by a final of 5-4 in overtime. The Penguins get one of a potential 4 points on their quick road trip. And, well, they just continue to fall further and further out of the race. But that doesn't mean we can't look forward. That doesn't mean we can't look to a big game on the schedule coming up Tuesday night. The return of Jake Guentzel for the first time since being traded by the Penguins back on March 7th ahead of the trade deadline down to the Carolina Hurricanes. And let's face facts. That loss stings. And it stings even more seeing how good he's been for the Carolina Hurricanes in just, 3 weeks since returning from that upper body injury. 12 points, 2 goals, 10 assists in 8 games as a member of the Hurricanes with a 6-1-1 record to boot. And the Canes are looking like a very dangerous team in the Eastern Conference, especially because of how quickly and how well Guentzel is meshed with that team. So it stings a little bit. He's coming back. It's going to be rubbed in the Penguins fans' faces a little bit. And the question remains, will he re-sign in Pittsburgh this summer? Will he re-sign in Carolina this summer? Or will he take his talents to a third team that he hasn't played for before at the National Hockey League level? That's a huge question mark going into the offseason. That's going to be one of the bigger storylines heading up until the July 1st opening of free agency. And while there is a chance that he pulls the old bait and switch, comes back to Pittsburgh, and the Penguins end up getting everything they got in return for him in the deal and getting his services. But I'm thinking it's likely he's not going to. Honestly, at this point, it seems more likely that he would sign with the Hurricanes if they're able to pay him what he wants, especially considering Guentzel went the entire season without a contract extension, without any real talk of it being close to signing a contract extension, despite the Penguins being in and out of contention all season long. So I would say it's likely he's not, which brings us to the next logical step in that discussion. How do you replace Jake Guentzel? Obviously, the last quarter of the season this season doesn't really matter about how you replace Jake Guentzel because, well, the Penguins aren't going to make the postseason. At this point, they're just playing to make sure Sidney Crosby gets over a point per game. At least that's why a lot of people are watching this team at this point, because they're not winning a lot of games. They're not really in contention, and they just continue to fall closer and closer to the top 10 and even further into the top 10 of the NHL entry draft. But that brings me to the point today. There is one player that's already on the roster that I feel could be considered a Jake Guentzel replacement. Therefore, this summer, instead of trying to replace Jake Guentzel, the 30-goal scorer, you have to replace this guy who is not a definitely surefire first liner, somebody that you need as a role player that can put in 20 goals. Somebody like a Jason Zucker would fill this role, and that is much easier to fill than Jake Guentzel, who is going to be a $9, potentially $10+ million player. And that player that's already on the roster is Bryan Rust. I know some of you might have already seen that coming. Some of you might roll your eyes at that opinion, but Rust has battled injuries all season long this year. 2 massive injuries that have cost him time. Missed almost the entirety of December with a lower body injury. And before that, he was on pace for 37 goals and 75 points this season. He missed 2 more weeks before the deadline with an upper body injury, and since then, he has 4 goals in 8 games since returning. So when he's played, he's been very good this season. 42 points in 50 games in total, 22 of them being goals, 54% of the shot attempts at 5-on-5, 56% of the expected goals at 5-on-5, 58% of the high danger chances at 5-on-5. And some of you don't like when I use analytics. I think it helps paint the picture. It certainly isn't the end all be all, but it helps certainly paint the picture of this guy's season. And the biggest thing when it comes to Bryan Rust, you look at the Penguins, who are one of the worst finishing teams in the National Hockey League. But hey, they had Jake Guentzel, who was good at finishing. They have Brian Rust, who's good at finishing too. 14.1% shooting percentage, which is double the team average of the Penguins. This guy certainly doesn't fall into the category of struggles to finish scoring chances. So why do I believe that he is a good Jake Guentzel replacement, if that's the way we want to go about it, and that's the way I'm looking at it? Well, he's always been a very good line mate for Sidney Crosby. The chemistry there is palpable. Now, it's not quite to the level of Jake Guentzel and Crosby, but as we've talked about, I don't think there's anybody that has that level of chemistry with Crosby. So at the end of the day, nobody is going to 100% fill the shoes, be that perennial 30 goal scorer, that automatic, you can pencil him in for potentially pushing for 40 goals. But Brian Rust, who has been a 20 goal scorer now for 5 consecutive seasons, 2 of them being shortened due to COVID, and this one battling through injuries, still at 22 goals, could finish at 25 or above. Who knows? There's 10 or 12 more games left this season. He's just a guy that has that shot. He has the hockey IQ. He's still fast despite being over the age of 30. He's still hard on the puck despite being a guy who's suffered those injuries. He's difficult to take off the puck. Look no further than yesterday when he scored that amazing goal against the Colorado Avalanche. That's not an aberration. That is just what Brian Rust does. He goes to the front of the net and he's able to finish off plays. So while, yes, it's going to be hard to replace a Jake Guentzel, when you go into free agency, if you're Kyle Dubas, I would pencil in Brian Rust as your Jake Guentzel and then just try to find another Brian Rust. I know that's not an easy, accomplishment or easy feat to accomplish, I guess I should say, but it's certainly less daunting than saying, well, there was a 40-goal scorer that was perennially a 30-goal scorer that was the greatest line mate to ever play with Crosby. We have to go find that and bring that in from outside the organization. Whereas the chemistry's already there with Rust. You just have to staple him to Crosby the way that Guentzel was. And I think that's the only thing that you see changed between Rust and Crosby and the Penguins. Rust stays on that first line, despite Rickard Rakell might struggle, and you might say, well, he needs to go up if there's somebody else working better. And Rust doesn't come off the line. I think that's going to be the big thing that you look at. You see that chemistry is already there, and I think with a no doubt not moving away from Crosby type of season, I think you see Brian Rust push for that first 30-goal season of his career. Shoot, if he wouldn't have been injured, he would have probably already had 30 this season and might be pushing for 40. Now, again, ifs and buts, and we can't say what it would be. What it is 22 goals in 50 games. That tells you on pace there that more than likely he would have had his first 30-goal season this year. So I like the idea of giving Brian Rust that opportunity to be the Penguins' next Jake Guentzel, especially in an organization that right now has a lot of holes that they need to fill. And Jake Guentzel's a big one. It's going to be about how you do it, especially when it comes to the money situation. Defense is a big issue. Bottom 6 is an issue. They're going to have to figure out backup goaltender because Alex Nedeljkovic is not under contract for next season. There's a lot of things that need to be addressed this season. Finding the next Jake Guentzel is on that list, and because of the way this team has performed this year, it automatically goes high onto that list. But if you can get Brian Rust into that role, and Brian Rust can take that leap next year, stay healthy, and become that 30-goal scorer that he is flirted with for the majority of the last half of a decade, then you got to find the next Brian Rust. And while, yeah, Rusty's great, that's a much less daunting task than finding a Jake Guentzel replacement to play alongside Sidney Crosby. You need a top 6 guy that has 20-goal potential then. Maybe somebody that could play the penalty kill. Maybe you get Brian Rust a little less penalty killing ice time, a little bit more power play ice time, and those numbers go up anyway. And maybe that helps the power play. Who knows? I'm done trying to figure out a solution for the power play. I think that's more of a next season thing at this point. But, while that still leaves a hole, it certainly makes it easier on Kyle Dubas, and it makes the job a little less daunting. And I like the idea of Brian Rust getting tabbed as the Penguins' best winger, because right now that's what he is. And despite the fact that there's an entire offseason ahead of us, I think that when camp opens in September, he's still going to be the best winger the Pittsburgh Penguins have. So they got to treat him that way. Staple gun him to Crosby. Let him be your next Jake Guentzel. Let me know if you agree in the comments. Let me know if there's somebody else out there that you think could be the next Jake Guentzel for the Penguins. And honestly, again, there's a non-zero chance that Jake Guentzel's the next Jake Guentzel and he just comes back. But there's also a chance, and a bigger chance, that he doesn't. Rust is under contract, $5 million. If you can get similar to Guentzel production for that price tag, you're in a good position moving forward. Now you have to do everything else right, but that certainly helps along the way. But that's going to do it for this episode of Ice-Burgh To Go. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Remember, you can find us on YouTube at Inside the Penguins or anywhere you get your podcasts from. We'll see you guys tomorrow.